Chat. So welcome, Max.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. And yeah, I thought we could just maybe give a little bit of introduction about yourself and about how we've met. We met at Ironhack in 2019, studying UX design together, and ever since, well, it's been 5 years now,
Yeah.
and I think we've both had like different career paths, and I think it can be interesting to explore all these things. So maybe the first question would be, how was your experience like first at Ironhack as a student?
Interesting. Yeah. Uh, I decided to do Ironhack because, well, I feel like there's a lot of resources there online in terms of UX, etc. There's lots of videos, lots of websites that can teach UX. Maybe at that time there were not that many, but these days there's plenty. But I think what Ironhack is good at least for me, that's why I wanted to do it, is because you do have, like I said, structure. You pay you pay for the course, so there's of course the money that you have invested, so you don't want to lose that, and it just forces you to do it. So you have two
Yeah,
months of like intense studying, and I think you, of course, if you're self-motivated, you could have gained that knowledge
yeah,
by
and
yourself. But having that structure and also people that you work on the projects together, I think I found it very valuable. So yeah, it just kind of forces you to just to do it and burn a little bit the bridges, because once you make that, as I said, investment, you're like,
exactly.
okay, I better now get a job to make it worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched two already, like very good points, like of Ironhack or in general this type of courses, which are well, one the networking. So the people that you met, like
Mm.
I mean, we're here because we've
Oh,
met at
Ironhack.
Ironhack,
Yeah.
but a lot of our friends from Ironhack are now like working at other companies. So you create this
Yeah.
network, and then the first one which you mentioned is like the investment, the commitment that you make
Exactly.
in terms of money. But really, the money that you pay is not for the value of the course. It's really like your own commitment to how much you want to invest in this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because you pay so much and you invest so much effort, then you sort of go all in into it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you put all the chips on
Yeah.
that.
And then like after Ironhack, what did you do after Ironhack?
There was some time for job hunting, so I think it took me around 3 months
Yeah.
to get the job. So I got a full-time job at Founders Factory, which was at London. It was. It's Founders Factory is the startup accelerator. It's funny because I think I was definitely underqualified for that job. So basically, the premise of the job is that you act as a product design expert and you support multiple startups. So you kind of take a co-founder role to help those startups launch their products. And this was my first product design job, and I was the only designer sort of supporting each startup. So there was a lot of responsibility. At the beginning, it was very tough. You have to make these big decisions, and the founders, they're of course they're are looking for your expertise, and they're listening. And a lot of the times you're like, oh, I'm not sure, but like I can't say I'm not sure because then they will not trust you. So you kind of have to learn along the way. But then I think with time, maybe after 1 year being there, I started to build confidence, and of course you start to see the patterns. In almost 2 years that I've been there. So yeah, I worked on many
Yeah.
different projects, and with each project, yeah, I was learning much more as a designer, improving, building confidence. So I feel like in that one job, I did 10 different jobs because it was 10 different projects. So it was a great way to start my
Yeah.
product design career.
Great way to learn. And how was it to be the only designer in?
Well, they did have other product designers, but we were all working on different projects. So we did have some sessions, like once a week we had it was like a design critique, but it wasn't really design critique. It was just for us to get together and basically share our frustrations about maybe working on certain projects, etc. So there was some community, and like of course there was some support, and if something you were not clear about, of course you could reach out. But yeah, you were the only designer responsible or working on that project. So it's not like when you work for a bigger company, especially at the beginning, if you're a junior designer, you might be assigned like a more senior designer who would be working with you, especially on the first projects, sort of holding your hand and supporting you. So I didn't have any of that at the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, I mean, you said that like the design reviews were not really like
No,
design, more like
no.
therapy sessions,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
sometimes that's all
Yeah,
we
it
need to
was
do.
helpful. It was kind of a way to vent out,
Yeah,
because
just to
yeah,
vent. And then from there, when did you move to Glovo? So just the overview of so you were at the Founders Factory,
yeah,
and then Glovo,
and then Glovo, yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
then Glovo, Revolut, and then back to Ironhack. We
and then
did a
back to
full
Ironhack,
circle.
exactly.
So yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about the change as well, like the into Glovo, like
Yeah.
because I'm guessing like going from like if something like Founders Factory to Glovo, like I don't know how many employees, but 1,500 people, maybe 2,000, and like a huge design team, as like bigger than a lot of companies, must have been like a like huge change, like in terms of processes and responsibilities.
No, yeah, for sure, it was a massive change. So yeah, in Glovo, they had at that time, yeah, so they divide the design team into courier, customer, of course, and then the partners. So the partners are the platform for the restaurants. So I was working on the courier. So although it's, yeah, sure, it's one big design team, but really you focus on more and within your segment. So I was very closely collaborating with the courier designer. So inside of the courier we had maybe like around 15 people, something like that, including researchers. And yeah, of course the nature of work is very different. It's also to do with nature of project. So when I was working at Founders Factories, basically from 0 to 1 type of projects. Whereas at Glovo, it was more enhancing product, building new features on top of the existing. So of course, that's also very different. Plus, we had dedicated researchers, which was definitely not something you would have at
For
Founders
each
Factory.
team?
Yeah, so Courier would have dedicated research customers, so etc. So yeah, typically how the project would run is, well, of course, there are some exceptions, but a typical project will start with the research. So researchers will do a generative research, understanding the insights, and then they will pass it over to designers,
Or
product designers, and then we will kind of carry on the process.
yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, to have someone to help you with all the research. But and what about the PM? Like, are they involved in the research too?
Yeah, I mean, they're involved in terms of just at the beginning, ensuring you're aligned in terms of the goal of the research. Are we really looking to find out what are we trying to find out? And then, of course, researchers have the independence to carry that research and autonomy there. And then, of course, they pass it over the insights to the PMs. And of course, there is discussion just to make sure no information is lost along the handover.
So, what types of deliverables? Because I've never worked with a researcher. What types like of deliverables, not just in research, but in the whole project phases, did you have? Did you and the rest of the team have to go through? So it all started with research, I guess, and
Yeah.
then the research would give some type of deliverable, I guess, to the
Yeah,
team.
they would do a report. So it was typically a presentation, set format. So yeah, where they will present different insights, data, also recommendations. So it would be like a report that they also present to a wider team. So just to make sure not only a designer who is gonna pick up that project, of course, understands what are the insights, but just as a wider team that we understand more about the product and different aspects of the product.
Yeah, nice. And then so from the insights, then those insights are passed to the product designer and the PM
Yeah.
to sort of build a solution, or is the insights already like what are the insights? Do they have an objective usually, or is it really just open-ended research? Or is there already like an idea of like we want to figure out these questions?
Well, basically, it highlights the problems, and it wouldn't necessarily prescribe your solution, because that would be a role of a designer to think of a solution for that problem. Sometimes it's very straightforward. Sometimes you do need to think a bit more in terms of how can we solve that particular pain point. No, so it's just more of a highlighting the issues and the data behind it without necessarily giving a solution.
No. And so then you would go and think of the solution with the PM. That is a global.
Yeah, exactly. You would collaborate and you conduct ideation sessions where you would invite not only PMs but maybe other designers, engineers, etc. So at least that's how I would love. I love
Yeah.
to
What would
conduct
you
my
say
process.
was the best thing? Well, the best thing of working at Glovo, but also in terms of like process, what was the thing that really worked well? Like there, if there was one thing that they do well in the design.
Well, to your first question, what overall in Global was the best? I think is the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has
Like,
amazing,
how's
amazing
the?
culture. Again, I'm speaking of like 2 years ago. I know there's been some changes, so I'm just talking about when I was there. No, it was great. You could tell really they were putting a lot of effort in creating great culture in my team. Amazing vibes. It felt like a family. Sometimes maybe also too much because sometimes when you all get along so well together and having so much fun, sometimes maybe we're like a bit distracted. But no, it felt like really a family.
So, so they really put effort into like what events or
Yeah,
making
they have
sure
a
that
lot of events. So they would do like twice per year, like these huge events where they would even like rent a huge venue, and it would be always like an amazing, amazing event. But also like typical things like Friday beers, but they would also do more stuff around the office, and they start to emphasize more the office culture, sort of bringing people together. Yeah, and I like that.
yeah,
It was something I was looking forward to come to the office and spend time with my teammates and go to one of those organized events. And it was great.
nice. Yeah. And what about the
That's the
like?
design part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the work, the work part.
The work. So what was great at Glovo in terms of the design? Um, we did prioritize a lot of testing, so we were not cutting corners there, because I know in some companies they might really go for speed, and therefore like, oh, we don't have time for testing. Let's just go with it. We'll test it live. But I felt like at Glovo it's something that everyone understood the value, and in the long term everyone understood that this is something that actually going to save time and save money, because you wouldn't have to change things that you push live, because to code thing and then to change that code, it of course takes much more effort to iterate on the prototype. We're saying comparing days versus like weeks or sometimes months. uh, so yeah, I think everyone understood that, and testing is something you didn't really need to advocate to the PMs, etc. In terms of, oh, we need to have that part of the process. It was like, sure, let's do testing. So I think that was, and sometimes you would do even for several rounds of testing. So maybe on like a mid fidelity, then high fidelity, then you would do a mix of qualitative testing with quantitative testing. So I mean, moderated and unmoderated. No, I think
Yeah,
that was good.
yeah. That's probably a little bit the stage of the company. I mean, early stages startup. I think, yeah, it's still good to do testing, but it's harder to actually do it because you have to prioritize speed so much that you end up test. And it's counterintuitive because you should actually, by slowing down with more testing, you actually go faster. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just sometimes harder to push for those things.
But
But then also, like, how, like, sometimes it's just there are so many things that you cannot test in a Figma prototype,
mhm,
and you have to build the thing. So
mhm.
you have to build like a beta product
Yeah,
basically to actually test it with
yeah,
customers.
yeah. Of course, no, you can't test everything. But coming back to that point, that it slows down the process. But yeah, sure, if you want to do super extensive testing and moderate it with a complex prototype, and then you would need to think, how do you recruit? Sure, that can take a while. But to do some sort of guerrilla testing with with five users, just to see if there's anything that's really needs to be fixed, that maybe, because as a designers, what happens a lot, we can develop this blind eye on things once we work on something for a while. So just also to test for those kind of things, that you're not missing something obvious. And yeah, there's also this statistics that with five tests, uncover like 80% of the insights. So there's definitely a after a certain threshold,
Yeah.
you might get some more insights, but it's not going to be a huge
And
make a
how
huge
would
difference.
you test usually? Like, would you make at Glovo at least like clickable prototypes and show them to user, or have them actually perform the actions, or maybe just show the designs?
No, yeah, it's always for interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to make them, the users, sort of
So
feel like it's a real solution. Of course, you would explain that it's a prototype and not everything is working. But yeah, I think you will get much more reliable responses if you sort of create the illusion of the product rather than sort of showing and
yeah,
asking to evaluate. So get them in a more realistic
yeah, that means
scenario.
of course a lot more work. Like I'm guess then you would have to create all of the user flows with every screen, every interaction if you want them to test a particular.
Oh, but that's the thing. Yeah, you don't have, not everything needs to be interactable because you would have a scenarios, right? And you would want user to go for that scenario in terms of interacting prototypes. So, and if they try to click somewhere that you haven't necessarily linked, you can always say, well, it's just a prototype,
Yeah,
so this is doesn't work, and that's fine. So that for that reason, I really don't think that, yeah, testing is something that takes a lot of time. As I said, you can do a very quick round of testing that takes 1 to 2 days to set up. So it doesn't have to be a huge investment of time. And for that reason, I think everyone should do it.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So, and okay, and then you moved from Glovo to Revolut,
To
right?
Revolut, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
What was the biggest change, like in terms of well everything, from two companies, culture, work, processes,
The speed.
the speed? Yeah.
Yeah, it
So a
was
lot
a
more focus on sprint.
massive change in speed. So at Glovo, just because not every, but a lot of the projects, they will start with generative research. So that's conducted by user researchers. And then you would do different rounds of testing, etc. Plus, yeah, I don't know. I feel like at Glovo things were. I mean, there was of course deadlines, but I think there was not so much pressure put. Whereas at Revolut, yeah, it was like a different game. I
More
remember,
pressure?
yeah, I would be like finishing a project in Revolut within a week. Maybe it's something at Glovo. I think with the pace at Glovo, it would have taken me a month. Just because it was just more like fast execution. They had also at Revolut this design reviews on a weekly schedule, and sort of you are expected to present your designs and this design reviews. So you also felt the pressure. Okay, I need to deliver before that. And there was also some, of course, optimization in terms of the process. So Revolut was a case, at least on their B2B part. So I was part of the B2B design team. They're not at that time um, prioritizing testing when it comes to just still a prototype. So they would test the solution, but once it's live.
Yeah. Let's say like that. If I was like a designer wanting to join Revolut, what? Well, not advice or warning. What we just suggest like to focus on, like for a new joiner at Revolut, like on the speed, quality, communication, or
Um,
like what is it that they really look for in a designer, at least to what you like experienced.
yeah, I think autonomy, at least how the business, the B2B part was set up, is that each designer was responsible for the mini app. And by mini app, I mean they have like I was responsible for the payroll product, but then they had lots of different products within the business suite. So each designer will be assigned to this mini app, and in a way you're owning that vertical. You do have some collaboration with other designers, again, with those design reviews, for example. But then again, you are responsible of carrying out all the designs for that particular minimap. So in a way, it felt like you're working in the startup within the bigger company. So that was actually great because that meant there was not so much bureaucracy, and in the bigger corporates there's sometimes things take forever because you need to get that approval, this agreement, that meeting, etc. But there you felt like you were really working with your close-knit team, yet you had the support of the bigger infrastructure of the company. So you had the resources, etc., to do that. So yeah, autonomy would be a big part. Um, what else? I would say when working for companies like Revolut or any other big company that has an established product, established design system, I think a big challenge is always how do you solve that problem operating with a with the parts that you have in terms of design system, design patterns. I think that was the biggest challenge. Um,
Like how to make your project fit with the.
how can you solve the problem, how can you design a solution that's consistent with the rest of the product, so in terms of design patterns, in terms of the components, that's actually a big challenge, because sometimes there's an obvious solution to things, but then it wouldn't necessarily fit with a design pattern of
So
that
you were
product.
working with a lot of constraints, basically.
There was a lot of constraints here in terms of how the current product was working, because you still need to respect that unity in terms of the solution. It will be very strange, right, for in terms of user experience, if you go to one section of the app, then you have like one way the app is working, and so yeah, sticking to this consistency in terms of the experience, it can be a challenge.
Yeah. How many designers were you at Revolut?
So in terms of the bigger design team, to be honest, I'm not even sure, because there was a very kind of a clear separation between customer and B2B. On the B2B part, um, I would say also maybe around 15, but they were expanding. So yeah,
Yeah. And you did design reviews just within the design team
within the yeah, so it will
or the
be
cross?
design reviews for the B2B part, and they will design reviews for the
Yeah. So you would
B2C
look
part.
at projects also that you're not involved.
Exactly,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And then how do you conduct the design reviews at Revolut?
Yeah, it was
Is it just someone
pretty
that presents every week
pretty
for everybody?
standard. Yeah, exactly. So you would yeah have a short amount of time to work through the problem, present the solution, and then at the end, people was challenged. And that was actually pretty great, because there was a lot of stakeholders present in that, including the CEO of the company was present in the design reviews, which made it a bit nerve wracking, to be honest. But to me, that showed that they put a big importance to the design, and I appreciated that. I know maybe some people would see it, oh, why? I always saw it as a positive thing, like great to have the top management present in the design critiques. That means they think it's important. Amazing. Um, yeah. So and people were kind of very open to ask questions and not being shy of stress testing your solution in front of everyone. And from the designer perspective, yeah, it was nerve wracking, because imagine what if they find a obvious fault in your solution, you kind of would feel embarrassed. But it's a good learning process too, to kind of to go through that every time. And you always, it makes you also before those design critiques sort of go through your solution, think of different edge cases. Edge cases is also something that Revolut, they were paying a lot of importance to. So think about different scenarios. What if this? What if that? And yeah, that was great.
Yeah. And so since they prioritize speed a lot,
Yeah.
would you like what have you learned? Like what are the methods you've learned to, be faster in your design? And also now probably teaching, like you see how a designer can be a little bit quicker in providing a solution or some solutions. Like is it just a matter of like experience, like using the tool, or like how can a designer be faster?
Um, to be honest, when you think about, okay, if we map out the design process, and you think what stages take the longest, it would probably be the research part. Uh, and again, the testing, but depends what kind of testing. Unmoderated testing would take longer time, because yeah, it's longer to set up, etc. Whereas moderated testing is probably can be done uh, quick. So at Revolut, when it came to generative research, again, they were mostly relying on data. So that wasn't necessarily a responsibility of the designer to conduct a generative research. Again, at least on the B2B part where I was involved, and the evaluative research. So when we talk about you were designing your solution and then in other companies you would test it. Again, this is something that Revolut deprioritized and they would test live. So then you're just left with a part where okay, you need to understand the context of the problem. So you might need to speak to certain stakeholders, etc. And then of course the solution, the design of the solution itself, which of course, yes, you could really elaborate a lot and think about what about this, what about that. Sure, but what a lot of the times I did is conducting competitive analysis, sort of not trying to reinvent the wheel, but see what works already and try to make it better. So I think that was helping to speed up the process. Plus, also at Revolut, they because they had such an established design system, we would even skip stages like low fidelity, mid fidelity. You would just jump straight to high fidelity because it actually was faster to design straight into high fidelity. Plus, what's the point of using low fidelity and thinking of sort of innovative new design layouts, whereas then you're just kind of forced to use a design system. So it was kind of pointless. So I guess yeah, that helped um, to launch things quicker. Plus, working in 2 week sprints and clearly establishing the objective for each sprint also kind of added the time pressure of like, okay, I need to deliver that within this sprint. All these things combined, I think, yeah, they resulted in an efficient work process. I'm not saying it's ideal. I think there, of course, we could have spent a little bit more time, especially when we talk about the research. Um, but that's philosophy of Revolut, and it kind of works, and that allows them to ship features very fast, especially when you compare it to some of Revolut's competitors. Um, I know it's the cycles in terms of launching a product, new features, new products at Revolut are much faster than at the other fintech or the neobanks out there in the market. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I agree that the point you made before, like the hardest or the slowest part is usually like knowing what to do. Like, so the research part, understanding the problem, and then once you kind of know the problem and this sort of high level solution, it's kind of easy. I mean, the fastest and easiest thing is to just produce the design and making the prototypes and the wireframes.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't take a lot of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I wish I had a researcher. I've never worked with a researcher, as I said before.
No.
That would be nice. But yeah, indeed, like I've been on so many projects that in the end, you know, maybe we didn't do research good enough, and then you have to go back to square one. So that's, you think you're going very fast, but then you start all over. So you're actually going very, very slow. It just feels faster because you're skipping steps. So
Yeah, I mean, it's also like a little bit of a different philosophies now when it comes to launching products. One philosophy is, of course, you do extensive research at the beginning. You really understand the problem, you test your solution, and then you have a sort of a lot of validation behind both the problem and then the solution, and then so sort of that will maximize the chance of your new feature, new product being a success. So that's one philosophy. Another philosophy is sort of what I think Revolut is closer at is okay. I think we understand enough about the problem. Let's look at some data. Let's design it. Let's launch it quick, and then we measure it. And if it's not a success, we either iterate on it or we kill it. Which one is better? I'm not sure.
what about UX writing? I haven't heard either Glovo or Revolut. Did you have UX writers?
Yeah, at Glovo we did UX writers. At Revolut, no, at least not on the. I would imagine on the customer side they would need to have. We did have to at Revolut, of course, check with legal in terms of the language we're using because, of course, it's a bank, so you need to be very careful in terms of what you communicate. But at Glovo, yes, we had the UX writer who was working closely with us on each project. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so then after Revolut, you went back to Ironhack
Yeah,
as a teacher. How
yeah.
was it to move like away from like a execution
The hands-on
role?
work. No, it was great. To be honest, I always had the thing for teaching, even way before I was involved in the UX. When I was a university student, or even before that, I was doing tutoring, like private tutoring for maths and economics, and then I did some volunteering experiences in terms of teaching abroad. So I always had a thing for teaching, and uh, in my heart I knew, okay, I would love one day to do teaching. Wasn't really sure what subject, what format, but it's something I really wanted to do. I thought maybe further along in my life, when you're like old and wise with a beard. But no, it was kind of a by chance. Being a Ironhack alumni, I was subscribed to their newsletter, so most of the time, so I was not reading it, of course. But last year, yeah, I received an email from Ironhack saying they're looking for a full-time UX instructor, and that email I did notice and I did open, and I was like, interesting. And at that point of time, I was actually looking for new opportunities, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. Maybe not necessarily I was planning to do at that time in my career, but I thought, why not? Let's see how that goes. At least let me start the recruiting process. And man, yeah, and I submitted my application, got contacted, went through a few interview stages, and
Yeah.
they accepted me. So yeah, I was like, well, okay, let's try it.
And what are the difference now in the course that is provided from 5 years ago? Like, is there any difference? I
uh,
mean, because I'm guessing like UX design has evolved. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. Actually, the design process seems to be largely the same, almost. The tools have changed.
yeah,
I
tools
mean, like
change.
we were working with Sketch,
Yeah, exactly.
so and now Figma is basically the most like
Yeah,
the Bible of. But yeah, design process is mostly the same, but a lot of the technologies might have changed, and also the styles. But uh, we don't really focus on UI trends. I guess it's more like about the overall design process.
yeah. But as you said, right, the fundamentals are the same. You're right. The tools are changing, so for sure now we are teaching Figma, not Sketch, and yeah, as you said, we did Sketch before, but fundamentally the design process is the same. So that has remained unchanged and will remain unchanged unless we invent a new type of design thinking to solve problems. So yeah, the design process, that's still a big part of the course. So students through different projects, they still, I think that in terms of number of projects, is, if I remember correctly, is still the same. So structure and content wise is very similar. And yeah, apart from the fact that yeah, we do now Figma, and yeah, we use FigJam for. I also, the big difference is that we did our bootcamp in the campus. I'm teaching remote, so of course we had to adapt a lot of.
Do you think the people doing the course now get the same value, like even remotely? Because as we said in the beginning, like there were really like two big values: the commitment, the
Yeah,
investment that you make, and the network, which
yeah,
I guess you don't really get as much.
it's a good point. No, I agree. I think if you do it presentially, I think there is a higher chance or more opportunities to build closer connection with your classmates. Having said that, it's still possible, and I have cases from my previous students who built a closer relationship throughout the bootcamp, and then they visited each other. So because they are from different countries, so it's all Europe, but it's like Germany, UK, France, no, well, UK, yeah, France, Spain. Um, yeah, and they had like little reunions organized, and some of them are actually from a lot of. I have a big proportion of students, for example, from Germany. So always I have a big chunk of the class from Berlin, etc. And it's much easier for them to organize and meet together. So they're still happening. That I agree. Maybe not as much as in the
Yeah,
campus space, but it's still possible.
and and then also with the current situation. So right now, well, there's been plenty of layoffs
Yeah,
globally.
yeah,
The market is not the best,
yeah,
for a new designer,
yeah.
like junior designer. I have my brother who just finished. the web dev
Okay.
bootcamp. Well, a year ago, but there are not that many open positions,
Mm-hmm.
especially for junior. So,
Yeah.
like, is it still like the best way to get into tech? You think, or is
Well,
it like as valuable as it was? Because the market has shrinked, at least at the moment. Might get back, but right now there are not as many positions. So how can one justify like investing so much for not not being sure about the reward, which is getting a job, in tech?
no, I agree with you. The market situation is different, and I do agree it's more difficult now for junior designers to get a job. Well, it took you how long to get a job? I think you were one of the first ones, no, after the bootcamp to land the
I
job,
was the first one,
the first one.
but
So
I did have previous experience, so I think I was yeah, I was not the well average or the
but
typical.
then still then I know not everyone from our course then proceeded to take a UX UI careers, but the ones I think who really wanted to do it, they managed to do it I think within the first 6 months, if not less.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think now situation is a bit different, although I still see I follow my students on LinkedIn, and I still see students getting the jobs and landing the junior positions. So it's still possible. I do see that it takes a little bit longer, and not everyone manages to do it. So yeah, it is the current situation. Let's see if that changes. But it's also understandable, right? There's kind of two components to this: the demand and the supply. So right in the first in the companies. So the demand part, because we're going through not the best time in terms of the tech sector, as you said, there's layoffs, so there's less demand from the companies in general. I think product designers, and even less for junior designers, and then in the supply part too, because there's been a lot of boot camps, a lot of courses. There's been a lot of new designers coming to the market. So I think these two things combined make it
yeah.
a bit more difficult, yeah, for people to obtain the UX UI jobs.
And what are some of the mistakes that you see often junior designers or even non-designers that come into Ironhack, as non-designers make in the beginning, or what do they focus on the wrong things?
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious. It's they put so much emphasis on Figma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like on the using the tool, or
yeah. They think that if they master Figma, they master design, which is of course totally wrong. It's just a tool. I think being a good designer is about thinking, and yeah, your problem solving skills. But because I think it's the most tangible thing, so it's easy to evaluate and see, oh, he's great or she's great at Figma or not, or like I can use components, I can use variants in a fancy way, and then people think, oh, okay, he's a great designer or she's a great designer just because that person knows how to use Figma. And even then, at the Ironhack, we do this voting for the final project, and the pattern I tend to see is that the project that get the most votes are the fanciest prototypes. So when you have like fancy interactions in terms of a drop down and then this hover effect and then this, rather than a project that maybe that team went through like rigorously through different stages of the design process and really spent time on research and understanding the fundamentally the problem and ideating. So yeah, a lot of
yeah.
emphasis on the tool rather than the
No,
thinking.
I see that, but I actually, I mean, it's sad, but it works. Meaning, there are also many companies that will look at that first, and I see it a little bit kind of like dating and like image and attraction. Like if you make something attractive, and it could be like the way you structure your design wireframes. So I'm not talking the design, but really how you show your design work to other people. It can be like they can see and it looks very shiny and all that, but a lot of companies fall for it, a lot of people, and like we fall for it.
Yeah.
But then when you go deeper, you might see that, okay, this looks very, very good, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like a shiny cover, right? That yeah, you can get distracted by.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Like yeah, presentation. So not only then, I guess what you're referring to, not only then the Figma skills, but the way you present your solution. So as you said, you might have did an okay job at like the design process, but then you presented it so well, your communication skills are amazing, and yeah, you spend some time on the presentation design itself.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, or I don't know, fortunately, I think a lot of the people will give you credit just on that the final bit, which is a
yeah,
learning for many designers. And I think we also understand that, okay, the communication skills and presentation skills are very important because you
yeah.
being evaluated on
Yeah,
that.
I actually have a. I mean, I might think that this is bad to say, but it's really, really important, and not like from a selfish perspective, because just because it works, it's sort of like a foot in the door. Whether it's like your portfolio being very, very nice or things like that, like it's great to solve a lot of problems, but in the end, it's also the way you frame it after. So if you can present your project like very confidently in a very nice way, like
No,
that might be more important even than the if you actually solve the problem sometimes. And I know like this is very counterintuitive,
controversial.
but it's like the way you, I mean, and this is true for companies, not just design, but
Yeah.
in general, like, if you can like sell the problem, it's there's a lot of value in selling, the problem or the solution. So,
No, no, 100%. But when I guess when I was coming back to your question, I was more referring to the Figma tool itself. So knowing how to use variants, components, properties when it comes to components, auto layout, all that stuff. I agree about the presentation skills are important, etc. But students, I see a common mistake, sort of just focusing more on that and evaluating their own success as a designers in terms of how confident they feel with Figma. I'm not even talking about the UI skills in terms of the creating visually appealing aesthetic, visually appealing designs. That's a separate thing. But yeah, so much emphasis is put on the Figma tool, but the presentation skills, of course, yeah, I totally
yeah,
agree.
it's very important,
It's super important.
the presentation, but also the communication and framing, your project always as a success, which is something I've struggled in the past, because for every project I've done, I always see all of the issues that, we, all of the, not mistakes, but the drawbacks we had, or the like compromises that we had to make. So I've never been super proud of any project just because I see where we were lacking.
But
But
can you
I've
give an
learned.
example? Like what would be kind of sort of compromises?
So I mean, design compromises, like for example, for speed, for example. So you would use like a solution that is like less pretty or less user friendly
Okay.
and things like that, because you have to. So you have to, or just, yeah. So lots of compromises, lots of like not bad design, but yeah, like just things that I wasn't super proud. But what I've learned and what I would advise everyone is like always frame your projects in what was successful, and without focusing on, yeah, there were problems here, maybe I would have not used this button, I would have not used this pattern if it was my company. But yeah, like focus on the successful part.
But why? What is it going to help with?
Yeah, because it's just about, like I was saying, like selling the project and promoting the success of the project is just as important as actually solving the problem, I think.
So then, is it then important to do that so that in your you are seen as a certain type of a designer? Because or why
Well,
why
it's
is it
not about
important
you,
to
but
sell it?
the project itself. Like, I think it's always important to really, it's a way of like stay positive and keep the positive light on every project you do, even if you're not super proud of it. Because I don't know, for me, I always see spot problems immediately with every project I've done. It's never perfect, and I focus on the imperfections. And I would advise like everyone to do the opposite.
I think generally in life, I
Yeah, in life,
think
in design, or
should look
whatever.
for
Just focus on what's
positives.
good. If there's one tiny good thing, just
Yeah, I remember actually I had a project when I worked at Glovo. Um, we did like spend a lot of time on research and maybe unreasonable of time on designing a solution and a prototype. And then during this testing stage, we started to realize, based on the feedback we got from the users, that maybe it was not really working well. And my response to that was like, amazing. Like, we just did not go for a solution that could have totally failed, because it was a big change in terms of the app. So it was to do with like scheduling of the slots for the couriers. It would have required months of the development. So from my perspective, I saw it, wow, amazing. We just invalidated something super quick, well, reasonably quick. Imagine if we didn't do that. But I felt like some team members saw it as a failure, and I never. Yeah, I think it's a bad way to see it, because the solution did not go through. So they feel like, okay, it's a failure. We wasted time. I think that's a totally wrong way of seeing things. Because I think, unfortunately, when we do testing, sometimes designers forget that, well, we're here to validate or invalidate things. But I think a lot of the times designers approach it from like, oh, I just want to get validation. I want to see that it works, and and they close a little bit their eyes on the fact that, like,
Yeah.
and maybe sometimes in during the testing stage, maybe that's where you need to be a little bit more open to all sorts of feedback and not have this sort of confirmation bias, or just people looking for people validating your solution and ignoring any comments that might undermine your solution or your approach. So at that stage, maybe you want to keep that balanced view. But yeah, sorry, I just thought I'll mention that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So to all new designers out there, like, don't focus on Figma, but focus on communication, problem solving.
Communication, problem solving. Figma, it's a tool. I mean, it's, yeah, of course, you need to understand how to use it in order to express your ideas. And
But I would say no, really, because even like, for example, I've seen there are a lot of new. So in the last year, there have been many new releases from Figma, like on the prototyping, for
yeah.
example, that I still haven't learned, for
Mhm.
example, and I'm totally fine without.
Yeah,
But
it's not the most important thing. Yeah, I mean, it might make it your prototype a bit more fancier, or make your design process a bit more efficient if you use components and properties well. But yeah, it's not the most important thing. It's like, I'm comparing it to the what makes a good painter, right? It's not the paint or the toothbrush they use. Toothbrush? What am I saying?
yeah,
The paintbrush.
you can use a toothbrush, I guess.
So it's of course, it's their skills, it's their vision, etc. Same with the music. You do music. It's, if you are what makes a good musician is not like a guitar that they're playing, right? It's
No,
their skills
sadly,
when it comes to music. So same with the design, no? It's a tool, like a paintbrush for a painter. So that's it.
great. I mean, I think that's a great note to end.
Okay.
Don't focus on the, well, yeah. So, well, thank you very much for doing this. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, good luck
Mm.
with everything. I'll see you.
Amazing. It was fun.
Yeah.